welcome to the very first episode of Jason's Game Room. This is a brand new podcast and video series on YouTube that is making its debut. And as the title implies, it is all about gaming. All types of gaming. Video games and consoles, dice games, CCGs, board games, D&D, anything that is gaming will end up on this show on a weekly basis. You're going to want to tune into the show every week. You're going to want to subscribe to this channel. You're going to want to like every new video. If you are a gaming enthusiast and if you have a passion for any kind of gaming, this is the place to be. I'm going to have special guests once in a while, time and life permitting, of course. These guests will be knowledgeable in certain aspects of gaming, and they will provide their own point of view on certain games that they've played and talk about their passion of gaming just as much as I will on this show. So I hope everybody sticks around every week and watches this and listens to the podcast. It's going to be great. I'm going to give you a bit of history about myself in terms of gaming. I started gaming in the 1980s. We're talking very first board games I played, which would be Snakes and Ladders and Chinese Checkers. You might consider that basic, but it's still gaming. And by 86, 87, somewhere around there, I had the Commodore VIC-20 computer entertainment system, which was my first video game console. I played fun games like Money Wars and Garden Wars, and it was a great time. I've just recently popped into a retro gaming store here in town where I live, and I actually saw a stack of Commodore VIC-20 games sitting on the shelf, and I almost screamed. I hadn't seen them in years except in pictures on the internet. Brought back a lot of memories. As the 80s progressed, I was never rich. My parents weren't rich, so we really couldn't afford anything other than what we had. I never had the Nintendo when it came out. My first system was a Game Boy, which I later traded up to a Super Nintendo, which became a Game Gear, which became a Genesis, and that's what got me into all that stuff. That would take me into the mid-90s, which was huge for me because as I was starting to progress up the ladder of video game consoles, I was also getting heavy into CCGs, which are customizable card games. CCGs first came to prominence in 1993 with Magic the Gathering. I started playing in 94 with another card game, which is going to be the topic of a future episode. And by the time the 90s ended, I was playing 5 different CCGs with hopes on starting a 6th. Never ended up that way because life changes and I was leaving my teenage years in the 90s and heading into my 20s. I had also moved up in video game consoles to the PS2 at some point, and I was doing that occasionally. But I've stayed close to the gaming circles as much as I can. I've tried to go to tournaments for CCGs and keep tabs on newer video games. Unfortunately, my video game journey stops with the PS3 because with the new system in the PS4 and with the pricing and everything else in life, I really didn't want to plunk down that kind of money for another system. But I do still keep advised of what's going on in the video gaming world with new games and new systems because it's always interesting to see what's up and coming. That being said, and since I've mentioned the PS3, I want to get right in to the main topic for today's episode. I wanted to go big, and today I'm going to talk about Skyrim. Now, because this is a gaming show and everyone out there that's listening are gaming enthusiasts, you got to know what Skyrim is, but I'll give you a brief history. Skyrim came out in 2011. It's the 5th installment in the Elder Scrolls series. It is an RPG. It is a massive open world RPG. It's a sandbox style. It's not a kind of game that I would normally go for. And anyone that knows me knows that it's definitely not the type of genre that I would just suddenly jump into. I'm more into racing games, adventure, Grand Theft Auto, sports. And I did not get into Skyrim in 2011 when it came out. A friend of mine told me about it, and I ended up getting into it, I believe, in 2014. I found myself a used copy for cheap, and I thought, okay, he's hyped this game up so bad, I have to try it now. Even though I don't play RPGs, it's a rare thing, I jumped into it, and you know what? It's one of the best games I've ever played. There is a lot you can do in Skyrim. There are many quests. You start off as a prisoner, you escape, a dragon shows up, pisses everybody off, people scream, people run away. Ah, dragon! And then the storyline continues from there where you're questing, you're picking up items, you're trying to enhance your weaponry. And further down the line, you meet the dragons and you have to start slaying the dragons in order to get somewhere and to build up your power. But you don't have to play the game in the way that it's laid out. That's the beauty of Skyrim. There's been many times where I've just stopped the main quest and I've wandered around the map just to explore and find things rather than do a quest. Because if you're doing quests all the time, it does get a bit boring. I'm not going to lie to you. But when you have a game like Skyrim where you can pretty much do whatever you want at any given time, it opens up the game dramatically and the sky's the limit. I've had some days where I've logged on to play Skyrim and I haven't done a quest. I haven't walked around. I've actually gone right to a couple caves and I've hacked up some bandits and made some quick gold and then traded some stuff because that's what I wanted to do. That is what makes Skyrim great. Because you can do what you want. Well, you can't kill chickens, unfortunately. And that's a weird thing because you can murder as many bandits as you want in horribly bad ways. No one cares in there. As soon as you strike a chicken, everybody hates you. You're going to jail. Why are you arresting me, sir? Is it because of those 367 bandits I killed? No, you hit that chicken, dude. You're out. Hey, I used to be an adventurer like you, but then I took an arrow to the knee. But aside from all that, yeah, Skyrim is an awesome game. And it is lengthy. It's not something you can just say, oh, I'm going to play 10 minutes and be done with it. Skyrim's not that kind of a game. If you're going to sit down and play Skyrim, you're in there for at least a few hours, even if you're just doing something as mundane as wandering around and picking flowers and shrubs for alchemy, which I do sometimes. I've spent 2-3 hours in one night just picking mountain berries and flowers and harvest and things like that just to use for alchemy to make potions. It's that kind of a game. It's hard for me to say anything other than that about it. If you have never played Skyrim, I would say get into it. You don't necessarily have to play any of the other Elder Scrolls games. I never did. I never really had an interest in any of those games. Skyrim was the only game like that interested me more because of that friend who badgered me about it, but it was a good idea. It's great. It really is. However, now we have to get into the highs, the lows, and the downright dirty, and believe it or not, Skyrim does have that. So, without any further ado, the highs of Skyrim, there's a lot of highs in the game. The graphics are insanely good. The gameplay is very good. The fact that real time passes in the game and you have an in-game clock and calendar telling you about the passage of time, and that adds to the attention to detail that this game has. I don't think I've seen a game that has this kind of attention to detail. Well, you know, Grand Theft Auto 5 has a bit, but not nearly as close as Skyrim. And as I said earlier in the show, the fact that it is a giant open world and you can play it any way you want, that's also a good high. It's extensive. The story is amazing. The characters are interesting. And what else can I say about the highs? It's a great game overall, but I have to get into the lows now because there are a few lows. Even a great game as Skyrim has a few lows. Number one, why the heck do half the characters in the game have the same voice? You could be in a different part of the map and two completely unrelated different characters that have nothing to do with each other have the same voice. I understand it costs money to hire voice actors for a video game, but that's a low in my opinion. It's very annoying because it happens a lot in the game, and Thank God the game is as great as it is. Otherwise, this would get a bigger strike from me. But I hate the fact that there's only like 3 or 4 voice actors in the whole game. That's annoying. Another low is the fact that you have to save often because sometimes the game will glitch out if you're doing too much. And as I stated earlier in the show, one of the lows is the fact that if you kill a chicken, you go to jail, but you can murder other people. There's instances in the game where certain things cause ridiculous penalties or nothing at all. And I would really like to know what they were thinking when they programmed that. And as much as I hate doing this, but also in the lows was some of what the dragons do. The dragons piss me off to a certain extent because you have to go fight them sooner or later, but for the most part, they don't like landing very often. And it's hard to use a shout or a burst of fire on a moving target. They could have made it a little bit different with the interface with the dragons. And with that being said, the downright dirty. And you'd think there'd be no downright dirty in a game like this, but unfortunately, there is one downright dirty, and that is there are a lot of inconsistencies in the game. This stems from certain quests where you could go into a building. You sneak into a building using your sneak. The guy knows you're there. He has an arrow sticking out of his head, but he says nobody's here. And another downright dirty is the glitches that happen in the game that take away from the graphics. Doesn't happen often, but it is a major pain in the ass when the game glitches out and causes all those polygons to screw up. I don't like that. That's a downright dirty. They could have maybe done a few more things before they released the game. I understand it's a big game. It's probably one of the biggest games at the time that came out. But come on, guys. And that's all I got for today. Thank you for listening to the first podcast of Jason's Game Room. Thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and tune in next week for next week's show. Everybody have a great day out there, and game on!